On today's episode, rumors continue to swirl surrounding forward Alex DeBrincat with a handful of teams reportedly interested in a trade with the Blackhawks. I'll also be going over Philipp Kurashev's 2021-2022 season recap. And then to wrap things up, per usual, to start off the week will be our Mailbag Monday fan segment, where I answer a question from a couple of lucky listeners right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Today is Monday, June 13th. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you can also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And if you're listening to the audio version of today's episode and you like what you're hearing, then please go and show some support first by following the podcast, which will only take a quick couple of seconds, literally just a quick click of the button will help me out tremendously. Go and leave the show 5 stars if you like what you're hearing today as well. And if you're tuning in through Apple Podcasts or through Spotify, then feel free to go and leave me a review as well. I always greatly appreciate getting feedback from all of my tremendous listeners out there. Go take a couple of seconds and give me a review. I would greatly appreciate it. And best of all, it's 100% for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast, whether that be through Apple Podcasts, Odyssey, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. It's all 100% for free. And if you go and follow the show right now, then you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each day. And if you're not already watching the video version right now of today's episode, then you got to be sure to go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Because if you haven't gotten the memo already, somehow, folks, each and every episode moving forward through the rest of the summer into training camp this fall is going to have a video attached to it as well. So if you haven't done so yet, please go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. I would greatly appreciate all the help that I can get. I'm really trying to keep boosting those numbers up. Also, go and smash the like button for me down below as well and comment as to what grade you think Blackhawks forward Philipp Kurashev deserves for his performance this season. And last, also be sure to go and ring the bell, go and turn on those push notifications so that way you can get notified when the episode gets uploaded to YouTube each and every day. All right, good morning, everyone. As always, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks, and for making the show your first listen here to start off your week. I hope everybody enjoyed a lovely weekend. We had some fantastic weather. I hope you spent it with friends and family and had a good time over the weekend. But back to reality a little bit here on Monday. Always tough to start off the week. But real quick, before I get into the show today, folks, I got to remind you all that today's episode is sponsored by BetOnline, which is both the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and Vegas casino games here in 2022. BetOnline, where the game begins. All right, to open things up this morning, first I wanted to kind of just pick up right where I left off on the last episode, which was talking about the recent trade rumors surrounding Chicago Blackhawks superstar Alex DeBrincat. And in case some of you out there live under a rock and somehow aren't up to date on some of the latest news, last week, TSN's Elliotte Friedman reported that Alex DeBrincat was the number 1 player available this offseason, according to him. He compiled a list of 20 to 30 players or so who are speculated to be on the trade market, and at the top of that list was none other than Alex DeBrincat. And after that, we also heard from an article by Scott Powers and Shayna Goldman that said one team source told them that he doesn't see DeBrincat finishing next season with the Blackhawks. He's either going to get moved this offseason or at next year's trade deadline. So all of that, folks, by the way, Friedman also stated, it was it Friedman or was it Frank Saravalli? It was Frank Saravalli. Pardon me. It was not Elliotte Friedman. those two are the gurus, if you will, of breaking hockey news, so that's why they're easy to confuse. But Sarah Valley posted that DeBrincat was the number one player available this offseason. And he also said it looks like a matter of when, not if, that DeBrincat is going to get dealt. So Blackhawks fans out there, I know it's a tough pill to swallow, but this is kind of a realization that we all got to come to, that Alex DeBrincat, it seems more than likely at this point that he's not going to be with the Chicago Blackhawks by the end of next season. There's a lot of things that go into it, right? Because when this news first broke, understandably so, a lot of Blackhawks fans were like, what the heck? Why would we try to trade Alex DeBrincat, one of the only players that actually has, superstar upside? He's already a superstar, a two-time 40-goal scorer. He's still relatively young in his career. One of the pieces it seems like we could actually build around here in Chicago. Why would we want to go and trade him? Well, a couple things tie into that. First, while DeBrincat, he's only making $6.1 million right now, he's going to need a qualifying offer of at least $9 million when that deal expires at the end of next season. And the Blackhawks, now that they're going to have financial wiggle room, but giving DeBrincat that big contract kind of could potentially limit the other things that they want to do throughout this rebuilding process. And, they're about to get, well, based on the news that we've heard recently on Taves and Kane as well, they're probably going to have both those players off the books, assuming that they're moving them. According to another team source, the Blackhawks reportedly would be willing to eat half of Kane and DeBrincat's contracts to move on from them. Also, they'd have to waive those no movement clauses. But you trade a player like DeBrincat, I think it's more likely that both of those two are going to be willing to do that. So with those contracts looking like they're going to come off the book, do the Blackhawks want to dish out another $9+ million right away to Alex DeBrincat? I mean, like I said, it's not going to break the bank, but it could tie their hands a little bit more than Kyle Davidson in the front office would like. So that's one thing that goes into it. I think the more important factor here, though, is Alex DeBrincat's 24 years old, and the Blackhawks are on this path where they're probably not going to be competitive for 3 to 5 years down the road, right? And that's probably, I mean, given how thin this prospect pool is, the Blackhawks, really their best chance of turning things around is drafting successfully in the early rounds over the next few years. And once, it takes a while for those players to develop. You don't want to go with the Stan Bowman route and rush them immediately to the NHL. We obviously saw where that's gotten us right now. So didn't work out so well. So with 3 to 5 years, probably more so 5 years being kind of an ideal timeline of when the Blackhawks would like to open up that window again, DeBrincat's already going to be pushing 30 years old at that point. And who knows, it's hard to tell exactly. I mean, sure, it looks like Alex DeBrincat's going to continue to be a fantastic player for a long, long time in this league. But once you push 30, you never really know what's going to happen. And DeBrincat is a pretty fast player, but with the league getting faster and faster as he gets older and older, if things continue to progress that way from the NHL standpoint, it's going to be harder for him to keep up as he gets older. So that's one thing that goes into it as well. And I've talked about this many times. I don't want the Blackhawks to trade Alex DeBrincat. I mean, I really do think it's going to be hard for them to gets another player or two who can do the things that he does well, right? Already a proven 40-goal scorer, and those don't just grow on trees, folks. It's hard to find 40-goal scorers in the NHL. I don't want the Blackhawks to trade him. It's going to be a very, very sad day if that day, in fact, comes. But if they want to start fresh, I mean, I understand it. It's not, obviously, as a fan, it's not the preferred route I want them to go, but it does make sense because clearly what they have right now has not been working for some time. Even if you keep on Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat, like I already mentioned, they're going to be much older into their careers once this team is ideally trying to be competitive again. So I get it. And if you can get an absolute haul for DeBrincat, like if someone gives Kyle Davidson an offer like Tampa Bay did for Brandon Hagel, where he just can't say no, I think he may have to do it. And at that point, if you move DeBrincat, you might as well move on from Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves too. We also have reports that Dominic Kubalik and Dylan Strome are pretty likely not going to be re-signed at this point. So if DeBrincat falls, it's probably going to be an all-out, I don't want to call it a fire sale because it's not like the Blackhawks are going to be giving away players for free or selling them for pennies on the dollar or anything. But all their star players, realistically, aside from Seth Jones, probably, because no one's going to want to take on that contract, the rest of the players on the roster are probably up for grabs, up for other teams, to go and make a good offer, and they'll be able to nab them. That just kind of seems like the situation we've now found ourselves in, folks. But as it relates to DeBrincat, I did want to mention that in the past couple of days, there have been some teams that have reportedly been interested in acquiring the Cat from Chicago. One of those teams, no surprise at all, is the New Jersey Devils, who have also had some trade rumors surrounding them in the past few weeks. They got the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft. They got a ton of cap room. They do have some young talent and a pretty deep prospect pool. So it would make sense for them both financially and in terms of their roster build to maybe make a move for the Cat. But the other teams, according to David Pagnota of the Fourth Period, that are interested in trading for DeBrincat right now are the Los Angeles Kings, the New York Islanders, and the Philadelphia Flyers. And look, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of more teams reaching out about DeBrincat. I mean, there's not just going to be 4 teams interested in acquiring him. A lot of teams are going to be interested, but with the contract that he's going to draw, there are only going to be a handful of teams that can actually afford him and have the ability to give the Blackhawks what they want back in return. So these are the 4 teams that kind of appear to be in the mix right now. I do think by and large, New Jersey is probably the most likely situation. They just have the most cap space. They have the most to offer back to the Blackhawks. I think it really does make sense for Chicago and New Jersey to be talking about Alex DeBrincat. The other team up here that makes a lot of sense to me would be the Los Angeles Kings, because they've put together, they made it to Game 7 against the Edmonton Oilers in the first round, and I don't think anyone expected the Los Angeles Kings to put together the year that they did. They might have been the biggest surprise in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but they have a lot of young talent. A lot of guys who are really just starting to step onto the scene. That could be very interesting for the Blackhawks as well, because their prospect pool is really talented and has been for some time. And some of these youngsters really are just making their first mark on the NHL, and they already qualified for the postseason next year. So getting a legit goal scorer like DeBrincat, the offensive side of things is probably where they're the weakest. The defense and the goaltending for them this year was really fantastic. Even in the playoffs without Drew Doughty, they held their own against an elite Oilers offense. So I think Los Angeles is probably another team that seems fit to be in the running to trade for DeBrincat. They got the pieces to do so. They also got some cap wiggle room. So those two, them and the New Jersey Devils, I think are the teams that would make the most sense in trading for DeBrincat. The Islanders and the Flyers, they do got some young pieces, but they're not as attractive, I would say, as New Jersey and Philadelphia's could potentially be. So I'd probably put the Islanders and the Flyers behind both the Kings and the Devils right now, but I'm sure there are going to be more teams giving good old Kyle Davidson a call and seeing what they could do to try and take Alex DeBrincat off his hands. So it's only going to pick up, folks. The drama and the intensity is only going to pick up as we start getting into the crucial stretch of the offseason for the NHL. Even though it's sad, it is going to be an exciting time to see, what the Blackhawks could potentially net in return for DeBrincat. And I'll be sure to keep all of you up to date right here on Locked On Blackhawks on all the latest Alex DeBrincat news. All right, that takes care of some of the current rumors surrounding Alex DeBrincat's future with the Chicago Blackhawks. Coming up in just a minute, I will get into forward Philipp Kurashev's 2021-2022 season recap segment. But first, I need to talk to you all about Athletic Greens and their new AG1 product. With just one scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and more to help you start your day. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, your focus, and your aging. And Athletic Greens was first created when the founder experienced a ton of gut issues themselves and ended up on a complicated supplement routine in order to recover. And that used to cost them $100 per day. But now Athletic Greens has an optimal and affordable nutrition routine that costs you less than $3 per day, which is such a cheap way to properly invest in your health and your body. And I'm not kidding, folks. I actually try to make sure I get my one scoop of AG1 each and every morning. Before I do the show, I actually had one this morning. It's kind of kind of a replacement for a coffee. It really gets the juices flowing early on in the morning and gets me right mentally before I got to do this show. And I also make sure I have at least one scoop before I go golfing each and every time, because when I'm out there on the course, I want to be dialed. I don't want to have any excuses. I want to make sure I'm locked in and can hit the best shot possible. It just gives me that extra boost that I need in order to get myself going in the mornings. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network right now. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and to pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, we're back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Real quick, before I get into segment 2, I have a quick favor to ask of you all. We've put together a survey at the Locked On Podcast Network so that we can learn more about listeners like you and to make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and what you don't like about Locked On Podcasts. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes this quick survey, plus if you go and leave my show a review with a comment and your name through Apple Podcasts or through Spotify, then you'll qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. So please go and take this quick survey. It'll take literally less than a minute. Also, go and leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and be sure to drop your name in the comment box down below, because if you win, I want to be sure I'll be able to contact you. And if you do win, you'll get one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. It's a free $100 to go to a couple different sporting events. I mean, come on. It's so easy. Please go and take the survey. Please go and leave me a review. It'll only take a quick couple seconds, and thank you all for your help. All right, enough of that. Getting into segment 2 now today. It's time to get into Blackhawks forward Philipp Kurashev's 2021-2022 season recap segment. And for Kurashev, I kind of felt like his season was a lot like a lot of Blackhawks players this year. And honestly, like the team in its entirety, I should say, it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride that, certainly had its share of frustrating moments. Lots of ups and downs, and really no consistency at all, because at times for Kurashev, we'd see flashes of this 22-year-old kid showing off the wheels. I think his speed is probably the biggest skill set that he has right now. He'd go out there and, blow by a defender or something to make a play happen in the offensive zone. He'd give us a little piece of that offensive skill set, and we'd be like, wow, where's this Philipp Kurashev been for the last 2 months? And then, after that, he'd go completely invisible for like a 10-game stretch or something along those lines. All in all, it probably wasn't, we probably didn't get the exact type of progression that we would want to see out of Philipp Kurashev in his second NHL season. But one thing I always try to keep in mind is he is still only 22 years old, and he also was a 4th round pick back in the 2018 NHL draft. I think people kind of forget that, because from 2019 to 2020, even last year, like Philipp Kurashev was really hyped up to potentially be the best forward in the Blackhawks pipelines. And, I think that more so was a indication of how thin the Blackhawks forward prospect pool really was. Not really a knock on Philipp Kurashev, because I do think he can be a solid NHL player one day. It's just, you got to remember, he's still very young and wasn't even supposed to be an NHLer probably at this point of his career. Like, I believe, if I have this correct, out of all the players who were drafted later than the 2nd round in the 2018 NHL draft, Philipp Kurashev is the only one to have 100 games of NHL action already under their belt. So that's definitely kind of one thing to take into consideration when looking at Kurashev's season. Most players that were taken in that round aren't even up at the NHL level yet, and a lot of them probably won't ever be NHLers. So take that with a grain of salt and realize the Blackhawks probably got a good one here in Philipp Kurashev for being a 4th round pick. But looking at some of the numbers that Philipp Kurashev had this season, he played in 67 games this year, which was a career high, but it's not really saying all that much, considering, like I said, this was just his 2nd NHL season. But in those 67 games, he did go on to tally 21 points, more than he had as a rookie, and it was 5 more points than he had as a rookie in a little bit less games. But the one thing I will say, he only scored 6 goals in those 67 games. It was not a very successful year for Kurashev in terms of finding the back of the net. And I went and I looked at some of his game logs to see kind of how all this broke down, and it was exactly as I remembered it, a full-blown roller coaster ride for Philipp Kurashev's goal scoring. He opened up the year with no goals in the first 21 games of the season. Then he proceeded to have 3 goals in his next 10 games, so finally got things started a little bit. And then he went on to finish the year with only 3 goals in his final 35 contests. So he basically had a stretch of scoring 3 goals in 56 games this year. We definitely need him to be a bit more consistent in that area moving forward, although I do think he's probably more likely to be. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 6 piece, but hey, he's still only 22 years old and crazier things have happened. I think he's more so of a middle 6, probably a third liner on a good team. But I do think he has better playmaking skills than sniping skills. Like, I think he's a better all-around player than he is just a goal scorer. I don't even know if we're going to ever see him. I mean, he could score 20, but I don't see him ever really pushing to get into the 30s or the 40s or anything like that. So I think he's more so of an all-around offensive player. I think that's why, the speed is probably his greatest asset, because that'll help him create some open space, and hopefully he'll be able to work on the vision, the passing abilities to set up teammates more frequently. But I still think at the end of the day, he's got to be scoring more than 6 goals in 67 games. I mean, come on. I get the Blackhawks offense was terrible, and he really wasn't getting that many looks with the skilled players. But 6 goals in 57 games, we just need him to be more consistent in that department moving forward. Some other stats I want to talk about for Kurashev: only 2 power play goals this year, which I think you can kind of look at this both ways. Obviously, we'd like to see him do more on the man advantage, but I've talked about it plenty of times when doing season recaps. Other than Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat, no other Blackhawks really had a strong year on the man advantage, and I think that tells you how much work the power play as a whole really needs. Like, whoever comes in and takes over behind the bench for the Blackhawks has to make sure that this power play gets better and that they're able to open up more scoring opportunities for different players, not just Kane and DeBrincat. And also, that second unit has to be better. Like, I don't know if they basically had no role at all this year. They get like 30 seconds, if that, on each power play. But we just need to be able to do more when our top guns aren't rolling. So Kurashev's part of that. There's a lot of young players who are part of that as well. Not going to judge them too harshly for being this bad on the man advantage this past season, because it was their fault, but it wasn't any one player in particular's fault. The whole group struggled, as I said, other than Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat. Also, Kurashev only shot 7% this year, which is dreadful. Getting into the Kirby Dach numbers, just not finding the back of the net as much as often as we would like to see. He was getting shots on goal, but 7% was way down from what he shot as a rookie. Hopefully that will just be kind of an outlier throughout his career, because I do think Kurashev has a good offensive game and certainly is capable of scoring more than 6 goals in 67 games. So hopefully, that's going to be maybe the worst output that we see of his career. Hopefully he won't be like a Kirby Dach, a 7.8% shooter throughout their career so far. But yeah, that's definitely, I think, one of the biggest areas that Kurashev needs to work on this offseason is definitely his shot, especially when the Blackhawks need other players from down the lineup to score more frequently to help out this offense. Kurashev also averaged 12 minutes and 51 seconds of time on ice, actually was down from his rookie year. And at the same time, though, you got to remember that the Blackhawks, in that shortened 56-game season, Kurashev was playing like top 6 minutes to start off the year. That was when Jonathan Toews was still out. Dylan Strome wasn't being the same player that he was. Kirby Dach had that snapped wrist. So Kurashev was getting a pretty decent opportunity for the most part of his rookie year. I'm not too surprised to see that number drop down a little bit at 12:51. I think that 12 to 14 minute range is probably what we can expect from him in the next couple of seasons at least. Another interesting tidbit of Kurashev's year: he only won 42.1% of his faceoffs, which obviously isn't good, but in comparison to his rookie year, he took a whole lot less draws. Only 121 faceoffs taken by Kurashev this year, which tells me that the Blackhawks probably aren't looking at him being a center long term. Not to rule it out completely. I still think that could be in the cards, but so far what we've seen, especially since Derek King took over, I don't know if he's going to be the permanent coach or not. I'd have to guess more than likely not, but Kurashev seems like he's going to be playing on the wing more and more, unless whoever comes in decides to put him at center, decides to put him back at center, I guess I should say. But it seems more likely that he's going to be on the wing. The Blackhawks, they're not deep at forward, but they do have some centers. It could change potentially with Jonathan Taves and Dylan Strome potentially on the out. So maybe Kurashev does see that jump, but he really hasn't had all that much success at the dot so far in his young career. But he has been better than Kirby Dach, I will say that. So I wouldn't completely rule out Kurashev playing center in the future for the Blackhawks. Also, I wanted to talk about Kurashev's defensive stats a little bit this year because, while they weren't like jumping off the page, one thing I did find interesting was he had 24 takeaways to only 11 giveaways. And I know he wasn't probably playing with the puck a ton and he only averaged less than 13 minutes per game, but to only have 11 giveaways in 67 games, I thought that was pretty impressive. And I think that goes to show you that Kurashev can be a decent puck handler and could be someone that the Blackhawks try to get more and more zone entries with because it appears he wasn't really coughing up the puck that much. And on the other side of things, 24 takeaways isn't a ton, but at least he had a positive ratio here in terms of takeaway to giveaway ratio. Not many Blackhawks did this season. So I thought that was one thing that stood out to me about Kurashev's year. 24 takeaways to only 11 giveaways in his 67 games this past season. Also, in terms of the analytics, Kurashev had a 46.9 Corsi for percentage. I actually want to pull it up right now because I didn't get a good glance at how many goals he was on the ice for compared to the goals against. I do want to pull those up. Look at me getting on it real quick. Kurashev was on the ice for 30 goals for to 40 against at 5-on-5 this season, which 40 goals against in 67 games. I've definitely seen worse when doing these season recaps. So not terrible. I don't think, the defensive aspect is the bread and butter for Kurashev by any means, but I think he is capable of being a sturdy defensive player one day. Like, it's not going to be a glaring weakness in his game. So I like what I've seen from that part. Playing in a third line, fourth line role this season, it's not like he was getting absolutely dominated out there or the opposition was scoring a ton of goals or anything like that. So I do think Kurashev, maybe the offense isn't going to be what we had hoped for, but if he can put together a really strong defensive game and he could be a staple of the third line and maybe the penalty kill one day down the road, and the Blackhawks are going to need players like that. All good teams have players like that up and down their lineup. You got to build your team well-rounded, and the Blackhawks don't have a lot of good defensive minded forwards other than a couple that they've signed on the fourth line. So I think Kurashev could provide value to this team in different areas than potentially what we thought he could have when he first signed on. So all in all, taking everything into consideration this year for Philipp Kurashev's season, offense wasn't particularly great. He was very streaky. He'd have stretches like 5 or 6 games where he'd be great, and then he'd go invisible, like I said, for 10 to 15 games or so. The shooting percentage and the goal scoring definitely needs to go up. I think he has shown some promise on the defensive side of things at such a young age, and that's one thing you got to remember. Again, only 22 years old still. He was a 4th-round pick back in 2018. For him to be already having 2 NHL seasons under his belt, that's pretty darn impressive. So, all in all, I'm going to give Blackhawks forward Philipp Kurashev a solid C for his performance this season for the Chicago Blackhawks. All right, that takes care of Philipp Kurashev's 2021-2022 season recap segment. Coming up in just a minute, I still got to get into our weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment, where I answer a question from a couple of lucky listeners right here on Locked On Blackhawks. But first, I need to talk to you all about BetOnline. It's that time of the year again, folks, as baseball season is finally upon us. It's going to take over for the summer here pretty soon. And BetOnline has way more odds and info, from game scores, totals, and player performance props. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all sports betting here in 2022. It's not just baseball. From the NBA and NHL playoffs, esports, golf, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, Do not wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is both the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and Vegas casino games. BetOnline, where the game begins. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Getting into segment 3 now today before I let you all go and enjoy the rest of your Mondays. I still got to answer a couple of questions as part of our weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment, where I answer a question from a couple of lucky listeners right here on Locked On Blackhawks. First question I wanted to answer today comes from @LucasReichelseason, who's a longtime listener of the show. Thank you for all the support, and thank you for always asking your questions to everyone. I always greatly appreciate that, and I love interacting with all you fans out there. It's what really makes this show fun, so please continue to do so to make this segment enjoyable. But the first question I got this week from Lucas Reichelseason on Twitter asked, prediction for our next head coach? Personally, I think it's a little bit too early for me to say who my ideal candidate is. I talked about this when going through the BetOnline odds of who the next Blackhawks head coach is going to be. My thing is there are so many names out there right now that it's all kind of speculation. Like the only ones that the Blackhawks really have ties to are Luke Richardson and Brad Shaw, who both reportedly have been requested for head coaching interviews by the Blackhawks. Other than that, it's just kind of a lot of names thrown at a dartboard right now. And there are a lot of names in there that I like, but I also think more so than that there's already names that we can already kind of cross off, right? Like John Tortorella, I don't think that's going to happen. Bruce Cassidy, I don't see it. Barry Trotz, I don't see it. Pete DeBoer could be the dark horse of that group, but all those three coaches are winners. They're all guys who have had success. They've coached in Stanley Cup finals recently. I just don't see them coming onto the Blackhawks to sign on for 3 to 5 years of pain before actually becoming good again. Mike Babcock was someone who was just ridiculously thrown into the mix. That would be horrible. Rick Tocchet, I do think, is an intriguing one, but I still kind of see that being an outsider. And the reason I kind of say that is because for the Blackhawks, I think we are going to see some outside the box type candidates given their current situation. Hence why, Brad Shaw is someone who's been requested for a head coaching interview. Luke Richardson, not to say that they aren't, quality candidates or anything. I really do believe that, especially Luke Richardson after I talked with Scott Matla, the host of Locked On Canadians. By the way, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, be sure to go and do so once this wraps up, because I talked with Scott Matla, as I said, who's one half of the Locked On Canadians podcast, and he gave me some really awesome insight on Luke Richardson, his tendencies, what type of guy he is, the roles that he had in Montreal, whether or not he's ready to be an NHL head coach. Lots of good stuff in that chat with Scott. So please make sure to go and check that out once this episode wraps up here shortly. But yeah, I think I kind of want to wait and see. I have a feeling that the Blackhawks, like their GM search, I have a feeling that they're going to list like their top 6 candidates. And then based on those, I think I'll be able to provide a better, accurate depiction of who exactly I want to be in there. But what I will say is I do really believe Luke Richardson is an interesting candidate and also a really good fit for what the Blackhawks need right now. If there was a veteran coach out there who I think could be actually in the race, Jim Montgomery for the St. Louis Blues is someone who I think would be, a good fit. It all comes down to whether or not he'd want to sign on for that rebuild. But to get a head coaching job in this league again, it might be a situation that he can't pass up. Also, coaching for an Original Six franchise in a city like Chicago could be enticing as well. So I'm kind of going to let things progress a little bit more because there's just so many names out there right now, and I kind of want to see that list get condensed a little bit before I say who my ideal candidate is or provide an actual prediction, because right now it's really just throwing darts at a dartboard. I'm not going to lie to you. Maybe not the answer that you were looking for, but that's how I personally feel about the topic right now. The second question I wanted to answer on the show here today comes from @SloanCole on Twitter, who asked, what do you think the ideal package is for Alex DeBrincat? Yeah, this has been something that it's been a debate on Twitter basically ever since the DeBrincat news broke a few days back. But for me personally, I talked earlier in the show how I think New Jersey is a really good fit. And if it is New Jersey, I think the conversation has to start with the number 2 overall pick and the 2023 first round pick. Unprotected. If you want Alex DeBrincat, New Jersey, If you want a 40-goal scorer, two-time 40-goal scorer, a young superstar at 24 years old, get this through your heads. You're going to have to give up something you don't want to give up. That's how the trade world works. Look, Stan Bowman isn't in charge anymore. We're not going to butcher this one. And look what type of deal it took just to get Brandon Hagel off of the Blackhawks' hands. Like, we got 2 first-round picks, Taylor Radish, who could look like a really solid player, and a bottom 6 guy in Boris Kachuk. I think that set the bar pretty high of what Kyle Davidson wants for some of his star players. And one thing I've also mentioned, Alex DeBrincat is available. We're not going to give him up for scot-free. It's going to be 100%. It will come down to the highest bidder. Who is going to give the Blackhawks the best offer for Alex DeBrincat? And if New Jersey wants him, I think they have the pieces to do so. And in my opinion, the conversation has to at least start with the 2nd overall pick this year and a first-round pick unprotected next year. You're probably going to have to throw in either, I was thinking, a 2nd or a 3rd-round pick in there too, or another solid prospect. Nolan Foote, he was another one that came to mind potentially. I know they wouldn't want to part ways with him, but this is where we're at right now. If they're giving us the 2nd and a 2023 unprotected first, which, by the way, the reason I want it unprotected is because even if the Devils do go and land DeBrincat next year, I don't think they're immediately ready to take a step and jump into the NHL playoffs. Like, yeah, crazier things have happened, but I still think they'd be right around a bottom 10 to bottom 15 team in the league, and that would give the Blackhawks a 3rd first-round pick in the 2023 NHL draft. That's the type of draft that can really change your franchise, and hopefully the Devils will be even worse than that, and the Blackhawks could give themselves maybe 2 picks inside the top 10. So I think that's an ideal start for the package return, but like I said, New Jersey's going to have to give us something else in there as well, because Kyle Davidson's going to have to be wowed. That's what it's going to take to get Alex DeBrincat off of the Blackhawks' hands. I think New Jersey's the best team to potentially give us that type of offer. We'll have to see what other teams are offering as well, but I think for New Jersey's situation, number 2 and a 2023 first is probably the ideal package. For other teams, it's multiple first-round picks and prospects. That's where you got to start. That's absolutely what it's going to take to land a player of the caliber of Alex DeBrincat in my mind. All right, folks, I think that is going to wrap up Monday, June 13th episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you all again for tuning into the show, and be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks right now, wherever you get your podcasts, and go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, and you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each day. And after the show, be sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast for all the latest news and updates ahead of the Stanley Cup final between the Colorado Avalanche and the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's free and available on all platforms, so be sure to go and check out Locked On NHL right now, wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, thank you for tuning into today's episode. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you could also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And for any questions at all regarding anything related to the show or to the Blackhawks, feel free to email lockdownblackhawks@gmail.com. You can also hit me up on any one of my Twitter accounts, or you could call 708-653-0572 to leave a voicemail. So until tomorrow's episode, thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.